Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining this lecture about Hubness-aware classification. With classification, we mean the common theoretical background of various recognition tasks. These recognition tasks are usually solved by machine learning approaches, so-called classifiers. First, I will introduce one of the simplest classifier, the so-called nearest neighbor classifier. As we will see, the problem of classification becomes rather challenging if we have to work with high-dimensional data. I will talk about these challenges, which are known under the umbrella of the course of dimensionality. One of the recently explored aspects of the course of dimensionality is the presence of hubs, which we will focus on in this lecture. After presenting this phenomenon, I will present a few Hubness-aware classifiers which try to alleviate the problems that arise from the presence of hubs. As I mentioned, classification is the common theoretical background of various recognition tasks. Such recognition tasks arise in various domains ranging from finance over online marketing to medicine. This slide shows an example for a classification task. In this example, we measure the expression levels of two genes. Based on the expression levels of these genes, we can distinguish two types of patients. That is, we can distinguish two subgroups of patients. For example, in case of breast cancer, the ER positive and ER negative, that is estrogen receptor positive and estrogen receptor negative subtypes of breast cancer can be distinguished based on gene expression levels. In this example, we don't really care about the two particular subgroups. We only assume that two subgroups are given, and the one subgroup of patients is denoted by these blue circles, and the second subgroup of patients is denoted by the red rectangles. And because of the fact that we are measuring the expression levels of two different genes, our patients can be mapped into a two-dimensional vector space, that is, into a coordinate system. For some of the patients, we already know which subgroup they belong to. However, there might be some new patients about which we don't know if they belong to the first or the second subgroup, if they belong to the group of blue circles or red rectangles. In this example, there is the yellow triangle in the middle of this coordinate system, and we want to decide about this yellow rectangle whether this person belongs to the first or the second group. The nearest neighbor classifier is one of the simplest classifiers which simply calculates the so-called nearest neighbors of this new patient. That is, it calculates those patients which are the closest to this triangle in this coordinate system. As you can see, the first nearest neighbor of this triangle is the circle numbered 6. That is, the object that is closest to this triangle is the circle numbered 6. Therefore, if we want to classify instance 11, that is the yellow triangle, based on its first nearest neighbor, then we would classify this yellow triangle as a blue circle. However, if we consider not only the first nearest neighbor of this yellow triangle, but we take 3 of its nearest neighbors into account, then we can see that 2 out of the 3 nearest neighbors belong to the class of red rectangles, whereas only one of the 3 nearest neighbors belongs to the class of blue circles. Therefore, if we use 3 of the nearest neighbors of the yellow triangle in order to classify this yellow triangle, then we will end up with classifying this yellow triangle as a red rectangle. Usually, Instead of talking about circles and rectangles, we may talk about instances that belong to the first or the second group, or rather about instances that belong to the first or second class, because in the domain of classification we call the groups classes. With classifying an instance, we mean the process of determining the class of an instance for which its class is unknown. As you can see, the nearest neighbor classifier is particularly simple. However, despite its simplicity, there are some mathematical theorems about the effectivity of nearest neighbor classifiers. Nearest neighbor classifiers are also very popular in practice, exactly because of their simplicity and because of their intuitive nature. That is, nearest neighbor classifiers deliver a human understandable explanation for the classification decisions in the form of a set of similar instances, in the form of the set of nearest neighbors. That is, a human expert may understand why the classifier classified an instance as belonging to the first or the second class. Nearest neighbor classifiers are especially popular for time series classification and for the classification of class-imbalanced data. However, as we will show in the upcoming lecture, nearest neighbor classifiers are affected by the presence of so-called hubs, that is, instances which surprisingly frequently appear as nearest neighbors of other instances. The presence of hubs has been shown to be related to the dimensionality of the data. Furthermore, it has been suggested that the presence of hubs is one of the recently explored aspects of the well-known course of dimensionality. Therefore, in the next video, we will review the course of dimensionality, and subsequently we will talk about the presence of hubs and their detrimental effect.